Welcome everyone. It's the bravest who have stayed behind today, but I'm very excited to be here with you today, and especially to be able to talk to these two guys about what I find a very fascinating topic, a very relevant topic as well. It is the ethics in PR and how we quantify ethics in PR. Obviously, in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine, ethics has become an agenda point for everyone, and there's pressure on organizations, businesses, and associations alike to react to how they interact and how they connect with companies and individuals from Russia in this particular case. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. The focus will be the wonderful and I'm sure challenging work that the PRCA Ethics Council have been doing in the last few years. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Francis Ingham, Director General of the PRCA, representing more than 30,000 members in the PR industry, and Beth West, Senior Strategist for Fletcher Marketing PR and a co-chair of the PRCA Ethics Council. And Francis, maybe if we can start with you first. Obviously, we all remember about 5 years ago the PRCA's actions and expulsion of Bell Pottinger in the UK. A lot of water has passed under the bridge, as it were, in that time, but the PRCA Ethics Council was formed in reaction to what happened 5 years ago. How has your work been evolving over time since that event, I should say, on a set of events 5 years ago? What are you focusing on?
Of course, thank you. So yes, in September 5 years ago, we expelled Bell Pottinger for its work in South Africa for the Gupta family, for stirring up racial hatred, as you've referred to. And that shone a spotlight on ethics in the PR community. Some clients who shouldn't be clients, and agencies that weren't members and governed by a code of conduct. In the light of it, we had our biggest increase in members ever, which showed the industry had an interest in proving its ethical nature. And we decided that there are common problems that we face all around the world, and we operate all around the world, and therefore we should create a global ethics council to address those issues in a common manner. And as you say, Beth is one of the co-chairs of that council. I mean, it's been doing a lot of work around, it now does an annual publication of essays around ethics questions around the world. Beth will talk about the work we're doing with two leading ethics organisations in Washington and in London, and we do regular podcasts and Twitter chats and so on. I think the industry has really woken up to the need to enforce high standards. Now, some of the research that Beth will talk about shows that we clearly have a lot further to go, but clients that were considered acceptable 10 years ago or even 5 years ago no longer are considered acceptable, and there is an expectation that you adhere to a code of conduct that is enforced. And as I do know that there are other associations around the world that don't enforce their codes of conduct, and that's an area that's got to change. Just to pick up on your comment about Russia, by the way, immediately the Russians invaded Ukraine, we withdrew all of our activity from Russia, and we expelled all of our Russian agency members. And we yesterday saw in the press a report of lobbying by professional bodies and management companies to resume work with Russia, which has been outlawed by the UK government. We were very clear yesterday that there can be no interaction with Russia on a business level. And it's remarkable, I think, that our members are all completely up for that. All of them resigned their contracts with Russia. And I don't think that would have happened necessarily some years ago.
So it's much more part of the agenda, front of mind.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
accepted and expected.
Expected
from people like you, organizations like you. So obviously, what you have been working on is creating a code of conduct and elevating ethics standards, but you are also doing this on a global level. So what are the challenges, Mary Beth, what are the challenges this presents to you as an organization and as co-hosts of this initiative, as well as how do you go about measuring something so huge?
Right. Well, I think that one of the more challenging aspects of the remit for the Global Ethics Council for the PRCA is the fact that it is a global ambition to try to elevate standards, which some of the initial phone calls or conference calls that we had with our team, it kept coming up again and again that different countries have, in different areas of the world, have different cultural standards about certain aspects of communications ethics. For example, giving and receiving of gifts as a brokered part of the relationship building process is in fact part of the issue in some countries, whereas in other countries that is a kind of a standard thing. So, and there are other examples of that as well. If we could cue up the slide, that would be great. One of the things that I found very interesting, and our Ethics Council did as well, a number of years ago, ECO, the International Communications Consultancy Organization, started asking a question as part of its global World PR report, the question of practitioners in the industry. Do you have a strong level of agreement, or what is your level of agreement on a Likert scale that the PR industry operates ethically? And what was interesting was that with the scale being 1 representing strong disagreement with that statement to 10 representing strong agreement, in 2019 there was a universal response of a 6.8 in level of agreement with that statement. Now that was pre-pandemic, and the next year there was a 6.3 level of agreement, obviously a drop. Bounced back a little bit in 2021, but still these numbers were very concerning to us because this was the industry basically rating itself as to whether there is ethical conduct going on. And the global PR report, the World PR report of ECO, does break these responses down by nation. And being from the United States, I found it very concerning that North America dropped almost an entire point in level of agreement within 1 year. So various regions of the world I think are confronted with various levels of challenge around this. And so to Francis's point, we decided to start partnering with a couple of different organizations whose business basically is to establish ethical standards and to promote those largely within the risk management arenas or those professional sectors. But that we wanted to bring them on board as part of our team to help on the communications front in developing PR ethics standards. So one was the Ethics and Compliance Initiative in Washington, D.C. The other is the Institute of Business Ethics in London. Both of these organizations actually work with one another quite frequently within that industry. And we have asked the CEOs of each of those organizations to actually join our Ethics Council, and both agreed to do that. Dr. Patricia Harned and Dr. Ian Peters with those respective organizations. So now we have that voice on our Ethics Council, and in terms of establishing metrics, one of the elements of what the ECI delivers, and they've had a longitudinal study for many years, the Global Business Ethics Survey, where they are evaluating a number of different areas such as ethical and organizational culture, pressure to compromise standards, observed misconduct, reported misconduct, and levels of retaliation. And this study that ECI has implemented over the years has been conducted among some 14,000 employees worldwide in different nations. So they have statistical significance within each of those countries as to levels of misconduct being reported across different industry sectors. So we wanted to take that model, that survey model, and basically replicate it to the PR industry. So we have a study in place right now that's going on that we will be implementing this summer, and very excited about having actual data around what public relations industry practitioners themselves have experienced in those areas. Now, the second study that we are conducting is of global PR industry codes of ethics, and this is a very different kind of study. When we look at that global remit of elevating standards, we really need to be looking at what other PR associations across the world are putting forward as their codes of ethics, and to determine what are the points of parity and points of differentiation among those codes. Are we all speaking the same language about what conduct should look like and what the issues are? So the IBE, and this is just this is a study that is about to be released, I would say, within the next month. And so they've conducted an overview of about 24 different ethics codes by 24 different organizations, the PRCA included, along a number of different criteria points. And so, and I've got a few slides here, and I'll just kind of run through a few of these as to what has been evaluated. I know everything from being able to locate the code online or having it be easily locatable, to what some of the codes, how old some of them are. I mean, we have issues nowadays, of course, of digital communications, AI, ESG, a lot of these issues that are much more prominent today than they ever would have been 20 years ago, yet we have a lot of different codes of ethics that were maybe authored years or decades ago and have not been touched since. So there's a relevancy factor there. Issues like user friendliness, the red there indicates where the IBE has found that a lot of work needs to be done to improve the codes that they've been evaluating. They've done a content review and looked at individual provisions across all of these codes to determine how many of the codes are actually dealing with certain subject matter. So this gives a little bit of a snapshot of that. So, and the last point I'll make is that among the codes as well, they have tried to evaluate whether PR industry associations are allowing a speak-up culture within their associations or promoting that to their members. And they have found that only about 13 of the codes are enforced of the 24 that have been evaluated. Only 2 include whistleblower protections for individuals who want to report misconduct. These are the kinds of issues that we would like to bring to the fore and be able to have some data around what the state of the industry is now and to have a baseline to that.
That's amazing and fascinating work around your partnership with these 2 other organizations. And to that point, Francis, the PRCA is clearly collaborating and cooperating, trying to find best practice, learn from everyone else. It's interestingly something we spoke about at AMEC level in terms of ethics in this part of the segment and the sector. So from your point of view, how has the cooperation with these 2 other organizations helped? What do they bring to the table?
Sure, well, we're very keen on collaborative work, as Richard will know from our years of work with AMEC. What they bring is a critical friend element and an ability to say the hard truths. So I wasn't aware, for example, I'm the chief exec of ECO, the umbrella body that many of these organisations are a member of. I wasn't aware that so few of them enforce their codes of conduct, for example. But this independent analysis that these 2 bodies are able to do of ethics within our industry is invaluable, because what I hope it will do is drive standards higher. And that's not just in the short term, because these are long-term relationships with people who specialize not in PR or evaluation or marketing, but specifically specialize in ethics. And it's that independent element that's vital. And as Mary Beth referred to, the chief execs of both of them joining our Global Ethics Council is a statement that we want those critical friends there on a permanent basis, telling us how we can improve things and challenging our members to reach higher and higher standards, because that's what clients have a right to expect.
Of course, yeah. And the research, obviously, Mary Beth, that you are working on at the moment, can you let everyone know when it will be finalized? And when it's finalized, how are you going to utilize and leverage those findings to improve standards in the industry?
Well, both studies will be completed this year. The IBE study on the codes of ethics is practically finalized within the next week or so. We're just doing a little bit of wrap-up work, and so the report will be issued by early this summer. The Global Business Ethics Survey for the PR industry that ECI is conducting for us will be a little bit later into the summer, perhaps into the fall, before the results are released. I will say that September is Ethics Month in the PR industry, and so we're looking forward toward leveraging a lot of the information that's going to be forthcoming out of these reports to bring forward issues in the industry. And there's tremendously rich data and insights about what the state of the industry is related to what's widely accepted or widely being discussed, and also to be able to point the direction and point the way toward how do we advance not only the conversation, but also help to make ethics a driver of trust. And of course, at the end of the day, we want to have economic viability and economic advancement for our industry. And there's the thing that is standing in our way more than anything else, in my view, is when our industry is viewed as being purveyors of ambiguity on issues and being even sought out for that. So I think that trying to draw more, not a line in the sand, but a line in the concrete on a lot of these matters can only enhance our ability to provide tools and ammunition for our practitioners to be able to make the case for ethical practice to their employers, to their clients, and to be able to point to stronger ethics codes that are in writing, that are codified, to make the case. Because I think a lot of practitioners struggle with that. How do I offer pushback if I'm being told to write in a news release certain claims or certain information that I know is not completely accurate, but I'm afraid to tell my CEO because that I'm not going to communicate that. I'm afraid that I'll risk my job or something, going to the retaliation piece of it. So, we're really trying to connect a lot of dots here about what the practitioner experience is in advocating for ethics in their organizations and being able to take a stand for that. And I think that long term, as Francis mentioned, that this work is going to have good traction, and that is our goal this year, is to really try to release it out into the public domain, and hopefully over several years be able to replicate some of these studies and determine how are we moving the bar. Are ethics codes, in fact, becoming more robust, more timely, due to our being able to raise the issue of, hey, right now we're very inadequate on a lot of these different issues.
This is amazing work, and I think in uncertain times, which we live in, it becomes even more important for us to be able to relate or refer to a set of standards, a set of practices. So we all look forward, I'm sure, to finding out more about the results of the study. But before I open up the floor for some questions, I wanted to ask you, Francis, a question around the Bell Pottinger case, kind of close the loop, if you want. I know as fascinating and important that work was for everyone in the industry and the wider society, it was a challenging time for the PRCA, the first of its kind, and I'm sure you personally and everyone involved came under a lot of pressure. How was that as an experience for you personally?
Oh, right. Well, I couldn't say it was fun. I received regular death threats and videos of how people had been murdered in South Africa from both sides of the political divide. People turned up at my house to hammer on the door who'd come from South Africa, and turned up at my children's house to take them away in a white van. And we held the hearings at an undisclosed location with police support. So it was a challenging period, but it was obviously the right thing to do, because codes are irrelevant if they're not enforced. and I think it set the bar for lots of associations around the world. If I could just go back to one thing about codes in general, the analysis that's been done, they need to be contemporary, and plenty of them aren't contemporary. So ESG, I opened the ECI conference in Washington a couple of weeks ago. It hardly ever appears in codes. The same for AI, which is vital for the future of our industry and of yours too, I imagine, and data integrity of how PR practitioners use the information that you give them. So that speaks to Mary Beth's point about is public commentary entirely accurate, or is it picking out the bits that you want to pick out? So and of course, codes need to evolve. So these are the challenges at the moment, but in future years those challenges will change, and we'll be trying to lead associations around the world to keep pace with those changes.
No, and look, obviously a lot of people in this room as well and online come from the measurement world in some shape or form or another, and we see that every day in our work, and I think that's part of everyone's life in business and elsewhere, to be relevant and contemporary and make the efforts, because that means efforts on your side, everyone involved, to invest in doing that.
Well, public expectations have changed fundamentally. What the public would accept a few years back, they won't accept now. They expect companies to have purpose rather than just to have profit. And the rise of social media means that stories simply don't go away. There is no place to hide. So the environment has changed, has been transformed, and that means that how PR practitioners operate needs to be transformed as well.
Totally, totally. Any questions from the floor? Jerry, I think I'll do the MC job as well.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Raina. Very interesting what you're talking about, Jerry Ward Press data. Are we at risk somehow of some form of kind of cultural imperialism around an ethics code? The frameworks in which you can work, clearly, if somebody is breaking a law in the territories in which they operate, it's clear cut. You know, in some ways you're relying upon a legislative framework that exists and it's gone through whatever potentially democratic processes take place. So you can tag alongside that. But where do we work in the world of kind of the subjectivity around some of these values, and what I might consider ethical, you might not consider ethical? The line is always, if you like, as far as I'm prepared to go. Everything the other side of that, in my view, is unethical. But my line might be different to other people's lines, and it's kind of how do we capture that? It's not criticism of what you have, and you have to start somewhere. But is there any risk that actually people might say, well, that's your ethics, that's not my ethics? What's the absolute objectivity that we can work with around this?
Well, if I could give that a go, I mean, I entirely accept what you say. Things that are acceptable in certain parts of the world aren't acceptable in others. And I think, therefore, that we have to recognise everybody's on a journey. So we have to help lead them on that way without finger pointing. But if you are, I know, different legal codes and so on, but if you are an association setting standards, then it is your role to raise those standards. And I think we can agree some common principles, like around telling the truth, for example, as a baseline. But the other point about this is that it's about a code being enforced. Well, that's not a cultural issue. It's about a code being readily available online. Well, that's not a cultural issue. So there are certain improvements that are easy to make without going to being culturally insensitive, as you say, because we operate in the Middle East, for example. Very different expectations about a whole range of social norms. But our code still applies there as much as it applies in England, because those basic principles are still the same, and the ability to enforce it is still the same.
Yeah, and I will also say that one of the reasons that we wanted to kick off a lot of this inquiry to include codes of ethics of 24 other associations based in almost 24 other nations is that very point, is that we know that there will be some points of differentiation for that very reason. And we fully want to be sensitive to that. I think it's actually a point of and an opportunity for us to learn about why are there differences, and can we help educate the larger global practitioner base as to why some differences do exist and that those should be acknowledged and respected. So I think that honestly, this exercise of being able to analyze these codes of ethics across different nations is really not to engage in a finger-pointing exercise about your code is good, yours is bad, or yours is adequate, yours is inadequate. It's really far more about trying to have an all ships rise kind of mentality about how can we all improve, and are there lessons that we can learn from one another? There may be an ethics code in another nation where they cover points and considerations that other nations or other national associations it hasn't even come across their radar screen before. So if we can share that information by virtue of this analysis, then I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi guys, Richard Bagnall. How are you finding other organizations responding to what you're doing? So to that point of it's not about finger wagging and it's about a rising tide lifting all ships. Are they reacting like that, or are they seeing this as a perceived threat to them? Are they working on their codes of ethics in anticipation of the research you're going to produce? I mean, what activities are you seeing are being driven by the work that you're doing?
Sure. Earlier this year, when IBE actually helped us in compiling the list of associations that we were going to query, and then a member of the PRCA team did an outreach to the representative of each of those associations to let them know that we were conducting this analysis, what our purpose was in doing that, and that we would love to share our results with them. And again, in a very non-threatening kind of manner, because again, this is not a finger-pointing exercise at all. It's really an information exchange more than anything else. Some of the associations we heard back from, others, and in fact, some of them said, oh, here is our code of ethics, and by the way, you can locate it online here at this link. Others, maybe we didn't hear back from. It wasn't necessarily a matter of they weren't interested, but if they had a code of ethics out in the public domain off of their website, we went ahead and did the analysis of that code, and we will share the information with them. Roundly, the response has been very positive and cooperative and collaborative, which is terrific. And I think that bodes well for our being able to leverage this as an opportunity for a positive and productive kind of exchange.
Any more questions? Thank you so much for the engaging discussion. We really appreciate you coming to the AMEC Summit, and we would always welcome you back. So thank you so much, Mary, Beth, and Francis.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.